Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Theopolis podcast. My name is Brian Motes, and I'm your host here from week to week. I'm assistant to Peter Leithart, the president of Theopolis Institute. Theopolis Institute teaches men and women to lead cultural renewal by renewing the church. Participants in our programs will gain competence to read the Bible imaginatively, worship God faithfully, and engage the culture intelligently. In this episode, Peter Leithart and James Jordan sit down to discuss chanting the Psalms. We hope you enjoy this discussion, and as always, thank you so much for listening.
Today we're talking about psalm chanting, and we've already discussed psalm singing, the importance of the psalms in church on a previous episode of the podcast. And the rationale for chanting as opposed to singing metrical versions of the Psalms. But we want to talk a little bit about how one gets started chanting, what kind of resources there are available for guiding a church or a family in learning how to chant. And so that'll be the topic for the next while. And Jim, you've done a lot of teaching of chanting in various settings in the past. What are some of the kind of rules of thumb that you would offer to people as they're trying to get started?
Well, I think one thing people should always bear in mind is that the distinction between singing and chanting is an oddity of the English language and doesn't exist anywhere else. It's just that we have a Germanic vocabulary which gives us zing and zingen, and we have a French vocabulary which gives us chant and chant. So chant has come to mean, for evangelical Protestants at least, singing that follows the words explicitly without changing the words to make them fit a rhythmical or rhyme pattern. So if you just let the words be there instead of turning them into a rhythmical pattern, let me see if I can. I didn't prepare much here, but help, Lord, for the godly man ceases to be, for the faithful disappear from among the sons of men. All right, there you have lines. You could chant those, so to speak. Help, Lord, for the godly man ceases to be, for the faithful disappear from among the sons of men. Or you can sing it. Help us, O Lord, the godly cease to be. The godly cease among the sons of men. You've got a rhythmical pattern there. And you change the words around a little bit to fit the rhythm. Now, as we said before, the danger of that is that the music becomes more important than the words. And so, in a lot of ways, we want to have what we are calling chanting first. But this is not the only way to chant. If you can take the words, glory be to God on high, and on earth peace to men of good will. Okay. Glory be to God on high, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And you are sticking with the words, but you're moving along without a rhythmical pattern. So
in that case, you're following a melody line.
Yeah.
And each syllable is on a different note. So in that sense, it's more like a metrical thing. But
yeah.
But it's following. It's not. You're not forcing the text into a rhythm and a meter that's dictated by the music. That's what you're saying.
Right.
Let the music taking over.
Okay.
The music, is that what you're saying? That the music becomes that prescribes a form on the words rather than the words determining the form.
Well, the way you can tell this is you take a hymn that everybody likes to sing, and you say, let's use this different melody here to it, and then you find out that what they really liked was the melody, what they were really grooving on. For instance, Ebenezer is set to once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide. People love that. Sounds just great until they get down into it, and you point out to them that this is actually a very liberal truth forever on the scaffold, wrong. God stands within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. It's not exactly orthodoxy, but it felt so good, and now we feel disappointed that this hymn that we sang unthinkingly. Or you go to a post-millennial Reformed church, and during Advent they wind up praying that Jesus will come tomorrow, and the last stanza will talk about how he's going to come and bring the millennium and all this, and you say, why are we singing this? Why don't we not sing the last stanza? Oh, well, I hadn't noticed that. We're just used to how fun this hymn sounds. All right, but how do we get this going? Well, I'm used to doing it in church. If you want to learn to chant, go to a church where they do it. Okay? Can't do that. Don't have that option. Get a musician from that Lutheran church to come over to yours and teach you as a church. That might be an option. Or it might be, we don't want those Lutherans coming over here and teaching us anything. So how can you do this? Well, one way is to sing and say, sing after me. Okay? That's the easiest way. Plus, the advantage is everybody hears the words twice. Okay? How long, O Lord, wilt thou forget me forever? Now you sing that. How long, O Lord, wilt thou forget me forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? So forth.
If I could interject something, that
no,
please.
No interjection.
I learned it from you, so I know that you can expound on this. But what you just did, for people who only know chant CDs, do people still listen to CDs? I don't know. So just no chant from Gregorian, from monks.
Oh, you mean the records?
Right, or no chant from an Episcopal cathedral.
Yeah.
What you just did sounds very strange because it's very vigorous and strong, and you aren't stretching things out and slowing the words way down.
Yeah.
You're singing at about the speed that you would say it, and with a certain vigor to it. So that's the way to do chant, rather than this more ethereal kind of thing that people are used to.
Again, I'm somewhat more familiar with Lutheran practice of, say, 50 years ago when I was growing up, but there were some Lutheran churches, the ones that I was associated with, where the liturgy went by pretty fast and pretty vigorously and pretty loud. And there were other Lutherans where to sing the liturgy was to sing it slow and mysteriously. And I'm on the loud and vigorous side of things, and I think that's where we should be. And a lot of times people don't want to chant because they think that it should sound like 19th century romantic Roman Catholic chant. And by romantic, I mean romanticism as a ethereal, mystic chords in cathedral choirs. Or it should sound like little boys singing with ping pong balls in their mouth. Okay, forget the ping pong ball. So, no, true chanting is singing, talking on pitch. It's talking on pitch. So it's not much slower than that. It can be slower, somewhat. But music has a certain effect on it. Music is the Holy Spirit's communication. The medium is the massage. As one Christian theologian said, a couple of generations ago. So how does the Word get massaged across to us? It's by the Holy Spirit, and that's the medium. Singing is the medium. All right, so that's one way to do it, okay? Get everybody doing it. Another way is to have a musician who's somewhat used to this sit down at the piano, play the notes, and sing it and say, "Sing after me." But if you have the notes written down or some marks, then people can do that. But it's going to help if you have a lot of people with you. There's simple chant. I sang, my voice isn't very good these days. What happens when you get to be 97 years old?
And yet you were a child just 50 years ago. Remarkable.
Yeah. Age happens fast when you're in the Reformed world. All right. So I just sang very simple, plain chant. Anglican chant has more chords in it. It's designed to be sung in harmony, which makes it a much more involved project, which is why you get your recordings of King's College and other places like that singing them. They sound good. People like listening to them, just like they like listening to those Spanish monks doing Gregorian chant in a really mysterious way. I mean, if you've got some medical marijuana on hand, that stuff's good and goes good. I'm told. So, but there are varieties of ways of singing this way, and if you can read music, if you can do anything with a keyboard, or keyboards are good because they make a little bit more noise than a guitar does. I was asked years ago in Poland, it was just a small church, and they said, "What do you think about a guitar for work?" And I said, "Well, one guitar is for romance. Well, for worship, you want 20 guitars." Talking about the Bible there, because you can make enough sound to be a chorus along with the people who are singing. But you use what you've got. So now, those of you who were curious about this and brought this matter up.
So the recommended Lutheran resources, certain Lutheran hymnals will have a series of chant settings that are fairly simple, like 3 or 4 notes. And you just take any text. Frequently you have psalms that are set with marks to indicate where the tone changes are. So they're already set up for those various chant tunes.
Lutheran hymnals that were published after 1960 or 1970 have those marks in the psalm text that indicate where you change your notes. And you get used to that. It doesn't take much time to get used to singing from that. But they'll have about half the psalms present in their book. Earlier hymnals have got the psalms there for responsive reading, phrase by phrase instead of verse by verse, which is far superior to what evangelicals low church evangelicals do. But still, they weren't yet into chanting. One of the nice things about Lutherans is if the scholars in any given Lutheran church get together and talk with each other and talk with Episcopalians and talk even with Presbyterians and others, and then they come up with what they think the churches ought to do, and they mail it out, everybody starts to do it. You don't have in those congregations as much of, second-guessing the clergy. The clergy are assumed to know what they're doing. And if they do something really weird, like ordain homosexuals, that's when the people rise up. But if they come up with some new songs or some new liturgies or something people will generally go along with it unless it's too weird. So that's harder to do in Presbyterian-type churches. Mm-hmm. You introduce something new, and the pastor doesn't have any authority. He's supposed to get his permission from a whole bunch of other people, and it's much more difficult to bring about change. And that's why the question about chanting that I've received over the last 30 years, people have sent letters and say, how do I get this going in my own family? Well, you really can't. Not easily. You can always sit down with your kids and say, sing after me, kids.
Yeah. And if you know how to read music, you can follow the simple chant. Well, the Church of England, the thing about Anglican chant, the Church of England has a psalter for the latest revision of the Book of Common Prayer that came out. This psalter came out probably 15 years ago or so. All 150 psalms. Yeah. Not all unique chant settings, but a variety of chant settings. Some of them are based on hymns. Psalm 46 has a tune that's based on A Mighty Fortress, and there's some Beethoven things. But when we would sing psalms when I was teaching at New St. Andrews, that was the psalter that we used, and the one reason for it was just it was a one-stop shopping. All of the psalms are there, and they're all already set for you, and they're fairly easy tunes to learn. They have harmonizations, so you can learn harmonies if you want, but the basic melody line are pretty simple to learn. But it is Anglican chant, and the translations were generally pretty strong. I thought there's some one of our longtime Biblical Horizons friends, who's a music minister, pointed out that the Psalm 1 makes all of the pronouns plural. It's blessed are they who do not walk in the counsel of the ungodly, and so on. So it loses the Christological individuality of the first psalm. And there's some things like that go on, but generally the translations are pretty strong, and they don't shy away from the hard phrases. Yeah, you get the slimy track of the snail in Psalm 58, and you've got dung in Psalm 83. So all the stuff you go to the Psalter looking for,
all the
there.
Stuff the kids like,
is there. And of course, we have you've produced some chant settings for the Psalms that you've translated. We've used those in our Theopolis courses. I don't know, Brian, are these on the website? Any of the
chantings are not.
The chantings are not.
No, they're not quite ready for prime time, but I hope to have the Songs of Ascent. Yeah. We need to sing them one more time for a week. Yeah. And see, when you have a bunch of people singing them and you find that they're all doing something slightly different from what you had written out, then you realize, okay, we need to change this. This is what people instinctively do. Yeah.
But you could one could take the translations that you've done that are available on the Theopolis website, the first couple of books of the Psalms, find a Lutheran hymnal that has a number of chant settings, and start using those with the text that we have. On the website.
I'm a musician in a church, and there are several churches that are doing this, either with us or with the ESV. Just you sit there and you read it through 2 or 3 times and see where your voice wants to change, and then you put your little slash marks on the page to indicate where the congregation needs to change. And then you listen to them disobey you. No, not really. But along those lines, what is available now is the Concordia has the ESV Psalter all pointed out for simple plain chant. But they only use 12 different tunes. Mm-hmm. And what we've hoped to do here is come up with something relatively unique for each psalm, and that relatively unique pattern for Psalm X is related to the Genevan tune for Psalm X, so that you can sing one and sing the other, and their husband and wife. Mm. The Genevan tune being the glorious glorification of the man's version. But so there's so many things you can do, but I think just singing and saying, "Sing after me," and if you don't even know what to sing, then you need to get recordings of Anglican chant are pretty close. Just imitate that. And now if you don't have any kind of a voice, then at some point, maybe if you want to teach your children, if you want to help them out, go over to find a conservative Lutheran church that's doing it, and ask their musician to get together with you and all your friends in your homeschool group and show you how.
Yeah.
And he'll be glad for the extra money.
Yeah.
And you'll be glad you asked him to do it.
Yeah. And you do make house calls.
Yeah. I've done so for a long time.
One last thing before we close down on this discussion, for Christians of a certain age who have never chanted before, it seems daunting. But when you start with kids, rhythmic speaking is it's what kids do. I mean, they love the rhythms. They love the this is a standard method in classical education these days, that you teach things by chanting. That's usually
you. 2 plus 2 is 4.
Yeah.
2 plus 3.
Yeah. Garden, land, and world. Garden, land, and world. Getting the biblical theology down. So in some ways, starting in a family setting where you're teaching your kids, as they're learning to sing, they're learning chanting is in the mix of things that they're learning to do.
Yeah.
That's a good place to start, because they don't have any of the scruples or objections to it that adult Christians can have.
Yes. Psalm 8 is the classical passage there. From the mouths of infants and nursing babies, you have established a foundation, a bulwark, because of your adversaries, to make the enemy and the revengeful shut up. Okay, to defeat the enemy. The first time we see this is David is not quite a nursing babe, but he sings and the demons go away from Saul. It's the next chapter where he defeats Goliath with stones. And so first the demons, then Goliath. And for long times in the history of the church, children have been organized as choirs. I know that in Catholic schools of my generation, all the little kids were taught the Mass. They were taught certain of the Gregorian hymns. And if there was a wedding or something, they'd ask for the children to be there, and they'd all sing. Calvin, of course, had the children set aside to learn the Genevan Psalms on the assumption that the kids learn them fast, they sing them loud, and they'll teach the parents. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that go on in some other churches where people have their Christian school, kids are all learning the Genevan Psalms. Sunday morning, the adults are learning them from the kids. Yeah. Works.
And you've also pointed out, I think we made this point when we talked about psalm singing in general, that this is an intergenerational process.
Yeah.
So that you're aiming to train a generation or two in the future to know the Psalter.
Right. And that makes them the army. Of course, you're working through Chronicles now, and you find out David and the commanders of the army established the choir. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, military units have marching bands associated with them even now. Yeah. And when Scots ran into battle, they had their musical instruments making noise while they painted their faces blue.
Yes.
So we don't usually think of these things, but they go together, and they had theological meaning. That the choir of Israel was the first part of the army to show up in battle. And that's the way the church is. And little kids are the first ones in.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the Theopolis Podcast. For more information and content from Theopolis, check us out online at theopolisinstitute.com. We release new articles every Tuesday and Thursday on our blog, so you can be sure to look out for those. You can also follow us on Twitter at _Theopolis, and on Facebook if you just search for our name. We do have monthly question and answer episodes, so if you have any questions that you'd like Peter Leithart or James Jordan to answer, you can submit those through a comment on SoundCloud, a message on Twitter, or a Facebook message.